Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes, it wears your face, and moves just slightly out of sync with the reflection. They found Daniel Hayes floating in the bayou. Bound. Shot. Confirmed dead. In his pocket, a note. Checkmate. Jr. But the message wasn't an ending. It was a warning. And for Clara Monroe, it meant one thing. Her war was no longer with the man who broke her. It was with the woman who looked just like her, and knew exactly where to hit next. Clara hadn't slept in days. Not after the call. Not after the body. Not after seeing her own eyes and Jane's expression, flickering on the screen one last time. But it wasn't just paranoia now. Someone had been in the safe house. A mirror in the guest room had been shattered, from the inside. And above the fragments, smeared in lipstick. "You owe me a face." Security footage? What? Entry logs? Erased. Before we begin, like this video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more intriguing stories. Now let's jump in. Jane hadn't just found Clara. She had been inside. And now, Clara knew she was on a countdown. Agent Ron Barlow had seen things that stayed with him. But even he wasn't ready for what they found on Daniel Hayes' encrypted drives, recovered from a storage locker he'd kept under a false identity in Baton Rouge. There were surveillance files. Thousands of them. Claire, June, their mother, their father. Timeline logs, facial recognition data, audio transcripts of conversations no one else had ever recorded. He was planning this for over a decade, Barlow whispered. The sisters weren't just part of the story, they were the story. And then came the true horror. Each sister had a file labeled with a code. CM1, JR2, JM3. CM1 was Clara Monroe. JR2 was Jane Reed. JM3 was June Monroe. But there was a fourth folder. Guess 4. The name in the file was Caitlin Sloan. Age 29. Adopted at birth. No known connection to the Monroe family. Except, her DNA was a 95% match to Clara and Jane. Another half-sister. One Daniel had never told Clara or Jane about. One Daniel had been watching for years. The file contained photos, some recent. One taken just 2 weeks ago outside a community college in Mississippi. In the background, a woman watching her. Face half-shadowed, but unmistakably Clara's. Agents located Caitlin in a small town outside Jackson. She was terrified. She'd been receiving strange letters for weeks. Warnings written in mirror script. Threats. Pictures of Clara. Pictures of Jane. At first she thought it was a cruel prank. Now she wasn't so sure. When she opened her front door one morning, she found a single object on her welcome mat. A baby doll. Dressed in black. Its eyes scratched out. And a tag around its neck that read, "One sister left." Here's where it all changed. Investigators dug deeper into the Monroe family history. The mother, Lillian Monroe, had been in and out of psychiatric institutions, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and severe dissociative trauma. But what no one realized is this. Lillian had given birth to 4 daughters. 2 were sent to live with relatives. 2 were taken by the state. And in a journal uncovered from her estate, Lillian wrote, "They took my girls. Split them like pieces of me. But I remember every face. He wanted one of them. I told him no. He took her anyway. He said he'd make her forget. But she'll remember when she sees the mirror." The he in the journal? That was Daniel Hayes. Now came the wildest theory yet, one proposed by profiler Dr. Emery Glass. Daniel wasn't grooming one woman, he said. He was creating 4. Each woman served a role in his twisted mythology. Clara was the wife, the centerpiece, the public face. Jane was the hunter, the fixer, the shadow. June was the tragedy, the sacrifice. Caitlin was the sleeper, the final trigger. Together, they formed a psychological opera, a warped family drama Daniel could control from behind the curtain. But something went wrong. Jane woke up, and she flipped the script. Jane was no longer acting out Daniel's plan. She was rewriting it in blood. She had killed Daniel. She had threatened Clara. And now, she wanted to unite the sisters, or destroy them. Because in her eyes, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about correction. "There's only room for one true daughter," she wrote in a note mailed to Caitlin. "And she knows how to clean up the mess." Clara, desperate to get ahead of Jane, returned to the old Monroe property, now just a shell after the fire. In the basement, behind the ruined fireplace, she found something everyone else had missed. A rusted box sealed in concrete. Inside, tapes, photos, letters, all written by June. In one, Dated 2 weeks before her death, she wrote, "I know what Jane is planning. She wants me gone. She says there's only room for two now, her and Clara. She's worse than Daniel. At least he lied to me with kindness. Jane, she doesn't lie at all." And then the final twist. Among June's letters was a birth certificate. Not hers. Not Caitlin's. Clara's. And the father's name? Not Daniel Hayes. Thomas Reed. Jane's father. Which meant Jane and Clara weren't half-sisters. They were full sisters. Twins. Separated at birth. Lillian hadn't had 4 daughters. She'd had 3. Jane, June, and Clara. Caitlin was Daniel's daughter. Clara collapsed to the floor. The world spun sideways. She had been Daniel's wife, and yet somehow, he had been grooming her half-sister to destroy her, while hiding the fact that he had fathered a child of his own with one of the Monroe women before Clara was even born. Was it Lillian? Or was it June? The answer was never made clear, because Jane burned the rest of the files. But what was clear, crystal clear, was that Jane was now on the hunt for Caitlin. Her final piece. Her last mirror to break. 3 days later, Caitlin vanished. Her car was found in a ditch near the Louisiana border. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just one thing in the driver's seat. A photo of Clara and Jane as babies. And on the back? "You can't outrun your reflection forever." Clara sits in a safe house again. Different location. Different name. But the feeling is the same. Watched. Stalked. Haunted. By her sister. By her husband's ghost. And by the question she can't answer. If Jane is the monster, and Caitlin is the daughter, and June was the martyr, what does that make me? The camera pans to her mirror. A smudge appears across her face. A whisper barely audible in the static. "She's closer than you think." Some families are built on love. Others are built on lies. But the worst are built on mirrors, because in a mirror, even monsters look like you. This story began with betrayal. A woman walked in on her husband. In bed. With her sister. But that was never the whole story. Because behind the betrayal was manipulation. Behind the manipulation, a system of control. And behind that system, a man whose twisted vision tore 4 women apart, just to watch them try to put themselves back together. But now, Clara Monroe would face the last truth. And the final cost. It was Clara who set the trap. After Caitlin's disappearance, she stopped running. She did something she hadn't done in years. She returned to Daniel's lake house. The place where it all began. The place he had proposed. The place Jane had once called the womb. She left a single light on. A letter on the table. And a small black box beside it, containing a mirror. On the mirror, written in lipstick, "Come see who you really are." Then she waited. Jane arrived at midnight. No disguise. No weapons. Just a calm, eerie silence. She stepped through the door like she never left. Like she belonged there. Clara sat across the room, staring into the fire. Neither sister spoke for nearly a minute. Then Jane said it, soft, almost wistful. "He chose you because you were breakable. He chose me because I wasn't." Clara didn't flinch. "He didn't choose you at all," she replied. "He built you. And then he abandoned you." Jane smiled. "Cold. Sure. You still don't get it, do you?" That's when Caitlin stepped out of the shadows. Alive. Shaking. Holding a tape recorder. Clara had found her days earlier, hiding in a motel room in Biloxi, terrified and half-starved. But what Caitlin had brought with her changed everything. A final recording. From Daniel Hayes. Left for Jane. If you're hearing this, it means you think you've won. But the game was never about who survives. It was about who remembers the lie. "You're not my creation. You're my experiment." Jane's smile faded. For the first time, she looked human. Wounded. Jane lunged at the tape recorder, smashed it, turned on Clara, screaming, "You think this makes you better than me? We were both his dolls." But Clara didn't move. She just whispered, "No, we were sisters. That's what he stole from us." And in that moment, Jane collapsed. She wept. The firelight flickered across her face, and for the first time in this entire twisted saga, there was no rage, only pain. Years of it, buried beneath masks and blood. In the days that followed, Jane surrendered. She told the authorities everything. The tapes, the manipulation, the murders, including Daniel's. She didn't fight it. She didn't justify it. She just said, "I didn't want to kill him. I wanted him to admit he made me this way. But he never did. So I made sure no one else would hear his lies." She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But in a rare moment of clarity, Jane left behind a letter for Clara. Don't forgive me. Just don't forget who we were before he found us. Clara moved away after the trial. Not to hide, but to heal. She kept Caitlin close, not out of obligation but out of understanding. They weren't sisters by blood alone. They were survivors of the same storm. Clara gave up the Monroe name, started over, but she never erased the past. She wrote it down. Every page, every truth. So that one day when the world asked, how could something like this happen? She could say, because we weren't looking in the mirror long enough. This was never just a story about infidelity. It wasn't even just a story about murder. It was about what happens when love becomes control, when trauma becomes a blueprint, and when the very people who are supposed to protect you become the architects of your destruction. Daniel Hayes didn't just manipulate women. He engineered them. He broke them into roles and made them live inside cages they didn't know they were in. But here's the thing. The story didn't end the way he planned, because the women woke up, and when they did, they chose to face the mirror, to look at the scars, to take back their stories, to stop the cycle, even if it meant walking through hell to do it. In the end, mirrors don't lie, they only show us what we refuse to see. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. No one has the right to define your worth. No one gets to rewrite your story, not a lover, not a parent, not even your own blood. Something feels wrong, speak. Someone breaks you down, leave. If you've been manipulated, it is not your fault. And if you're still standing, no matter how broken you feel, you've already done the hardest part. You survived. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you think, like this video, comment below and share your thoughts. Your voice matters. Share it with someone who needs to hear that surviving isn't weakness, it's power. And subscribe to the channel for more true stories that peel back the surface and reveal what's really underneath. Because in a world full of broken mirrors, we're here to help you see clearly. Thank you for watching.